Hi, good morning, everyone. How's it going today? If you want to say hi in the chat and let me know that you are here. Yay. Hi, Jamie. It's an intense time. I really, for about to start school, I'm about to get really busy, but I hope that I can find time to see people because I really miss everyone. And I hope I can see some of you in real life sometime, i.e. Jamie. So today we are going to be talking about ways to make your landscape paintings more exciting, more dynamic. Hi, Joan. Hey, Lisa. Awesome to see you. So I have this sheet that I usually hand out in my classes, but you're not here and I don't have it online at the moment, but maybe at some point I'll put it up live or on like my blog or something and link to it down below. But there's a few things I'm going to touch on in today's video. This is just a broad video. We're not going to talk about anything specific necessarily, like painting clouds or trees or anything like that, but just different things you might try if you want to just steer your paintings in a different direction. Hi, Roberta. Yay. So I have I don't know if y'all can see, I included a link up there and here, I'll try to do it again. That's not the one, hold on. And this is a link to a photograph I took from the residency I was just at in upstate New York at the Golden Art Foundation. I chose this picture because it has personal meaning to me, and that's what I'm going to be working from today. However, if you have your own photograph, maybe even looking out the window of your studio, if there's a certain thing that you want to work from today, please, I encourage you to do that because, like I said, this isn't going to be, we're not necessarily focused on a specific aspect of the landscape. We're just going to be focusing on landscape in general, and it doesn't really make sense. I said we're going to be focusing on landscape in general, but we're going to just be talking about broadly about how to approach landscape painting. So this could in many ways apply to plein air painting also. Yay, hi Judith, I'm so glad you made it. So yeah, so like I said, you can use that image that I sent or have your own images on hand of places that resonate with you. So I'm going to work from that image. I did print it out, but my printer is really funky. I need more ink, put these lines in it. Sometimes it's nice to have a physical copy of the landscape. My ideal is to work out in the landscape. Lately, I've been enjoying painting from my porch because I have like the comforts of my home. I don't have to go too far, but you know, it's up to you what you want to choose. Hey, Barb, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining. So, okay. So first I want to start with composition and ways that you can use composition to different compositional strategies to make your portrait or your paintings more interesting. Hi, Anne. This is so special to see everyone. Okay, so first thing, before we get into that, let's go ahead and instead of starting from a white canvas or a white piece of paper, let's go ahead and put some kind of a tone down on the canvas, just so we're not using white right off the bat. And like I said, we'll probably do a couple of smaller studies. I have a larger piece of paper up here also, but to begin with, I'm just going to work kind of small. So this is, I think, 9 by 12. And I'm going to start put all these colors out. I have my normal palette of colors. So, hi, Joanne. I have titanium white, cadmium yellow, alizarin crimson is the dark red, cadmium red light, which is this lighter red. These two reds, I like using them both. I have some burnt sienna and phthalo blue. And then I have a little left over here of this light ultramarine blue. But beyond these colors, I leave it up to you what you want to use. I don't use a lot of black in my landscapes because because everything turns gray really quickly, but you could use black. There's nothing wrong with that. Hi, Susan. I have this color sepia that I really like. It's a dark brown, and this is in the high flow acrylic, which is fine to use. So I'm going to go ahead and put some of that down. But any other color you want to use is great. We'll talk about color mixing a little later on. But to start with, let's just go ahead and put a color down so we're not just working from white. So I'm going to use burnt sienna just because it's a nice middle ground neutral value. If you don't have this color, what you can do is you can mix like a red, yellow, and brown together to get something like this. And what I'm going to do is use some water and just do a really loose ground on here, a loose base on here. And you can also take a paper towel. To do this a little quicker, you can take a paper towel, wet it slightly, dip it in your paint, and then just brush it across the paper like this. That's a nice, easy, and quick way to get to tint your canvas. And the reason why some people like to do this, there's a couple reasons. One is because this way you can go darker and lighter from here. Another reason is because this way you don't have little white flecks of paper showing through on your painting. It kind of sets the tone for your painting. If you want to mix it up a little bit here and try a couple of colors, you can. You might even be preemptive in your approach and look at your picture you're going to work from. And if there's like a few blocks of color happening in the landscape, you might break up this initial ground accordingly. You might just sort of loosely break it up between sky and land. Or something like that, but you know, it can be loose. We're going to be painting over this. There may be moments where this still comes through, but it's kind of just like the bass line, you know, in a piece of music. It's always there and it holds the whole piece together, but you're not always aware of it. And if I'm going to be working with a lot of greens and blues, I like to use a warmer color for my tone here, but it's up to you. You can also use gray. A lot of artists use just Payne's gray, or just mix your brown and blue together with some white and get some gray that way. If you're working with a very warm, hot, like a desert or a sunset, sometimes it's nice to have a cooler base to work on top of. But I'm just putting that out there as a suggestion. So as far as composition goes, sometimes it's nice to be surprising with your composition. You know, we can do very obvious, you know, put a tree here and a house here, and, you know, we can be really obvious with our composition. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you have the opportunity to be surprising, try to do it. Like, for example, with this, the link that I sent out to you, One thing you might try doing is just focusing on the sky and doing just a little bit of the land and making, and maybe even putting your canvas this way, doing all sky and a little bit of land down here. That could be one surprising way to do a composition. Another would be to make all your land up to here and just leave a little strip um, of busier stuff on top. You could do it this way as well. I'm going to share a link with you to an artist whose landscapes I am a huge fan of. Her name is Lisa Sandietz, and this is her website, but I have it on a specific painting right now, but feel free to look through, her whole website's really interesting. But she demonstrates a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about today. This particular painting that I sent you, you see how the composition of it's really interesting, how there's a lot of open space there that's like probably like some kind of water. And then the busier aspect, like the city scene, is just occupying like the top third or the top fourth of the painting. This is also a good painting to look at in terms of layers. You can see this kind of orange color like popping through everything, and I would say that's probably like her underpainting, like the tone that we just put down, that's coming through here. So yeah, I'll be referring back to this picture for a couple of things today. All right, so yeah, think about your composition, make it surprising. Another thing, you can think about the rule of thirds, which is when you divide a canvas into 3 parts. I'll just very loosely do it here. You can just imagine dividing your canvas up into 3 parts this way and 3 parts horizontally. And then where those lines intersect is a nice place for a point of interest. And this is suggested as opposed to just putting like a house right here in the center of your picture, and then there you are. Sometimes shifting things off from the center can bring a little more interest to the piece. I just put that out there. There's always exceptions to things. Nothing is 100%. So, you might make a painting of a hill with a little house on top, and it gives this feeling of like loneliness that could be really compelling too. So just think about how your composition affects the mood of your piece. Okay, that's just a couple of things to think about that way. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with this piece, this photograph. It's not a good photo. Again, like I said, just use whatever you like. And we're going to work a little bit quicker today. Because I find what people tend to do is they struggle over getting all the details in a piece and like finishing off everything really perfectly. And sometimes if you leave elements of the painting unresolved, that can make something very interesting. And then also, you don't have to put in every detail. And going back to that painting that I just shared with you, you notice how in the foreground, it's very simple. Like she doesn't put in all the details of the waves and the reflections. She's edited the landscape. So sometimes what you leave out is just as important as what you put in. Okay, so I'm going to start with this. I'm going to look at my picture here. I'm going to work from, and I'm going to try to think of like, okay, what's going to be an interesting composition. And I have a specific memory associated with this place. I remember the sky being really interesting and really powerful. And so I think what I want to do is focus on the sky in this painting. And I may just kind of ignore a lot of that green in the foreground and let's see, maybe start the horizon on the bottom quarter of the painting. So what I do first is just loosely block in where things are going to go. And if I'm doing a plein air painting, this is the same. I will look at, my surroundings, and then I'll just first try to get the framework of the painting. And then I'll get the light and all of that stuff in later. But for now, I just want to get like the basic composition of the painting down. If there's any questions. And since no one's going to be looking at your source material, like your photograph, no one knows what you're actually painting, you have the liberty to change things. They don't have to be exactly as they are in the photo. I just like to use the photo as reference and not as, the thing I need to copy exactly. So this is just very basic. Here's where the tree is going to be. Here's where the shed is going to be, the horizon line, and then most of this will be sky up here. So I will move in now to talking about brushes and color mixing. So it's up to you. I mean, we all like different kinds of paintings. Some people want to paint more realistically. Some people want to paint looser. I want to challenge you right now to take your biggest brush and try to work with your biggest brush at this point. If you have a really nice flat brush like this, this is good. You can get lines with this. You can get details with the corner, but just try to take your biggest brush just for this study and use it. Yeah, I know. I really like your work. Okay, so I'm going to start with, in my picture here, I'm going to start with the sky, and I'm going to work very loosely. And I'm going to try to preserve the element of the sunset here, that the contrasting colors. So I'll start with my phthalo blue and my burnt sienna. That's always a nice place to start if you need some kind of a gray color. See about adding a little purple there. So this is a pretty good color, what I have there. I'm going to add some water to my piece. You could also add some glazing fluid just to make the paint flow a little bit better. And I'm going to just start blocking in my sky here. I'm also trying to use my brushwork to kind of enhance the drama of this sky. Um, Painting in the direction I see the clouds kind of coming into the sky. So with acrylics, it's really nice. You know, acrylics are very forgiving, and you can start with a darker color and go light. You can start with a lighter color and go darker. With oils, you don't always have that flexibility. I generally advise people to not work too light at first, like not too much white at first with with oils. And for this painting, just consider it a study. We're not going to be getting into so much detail with this. We're just going to loosely paint in. And instead of trying to get every single little detail, just try to get, the feeling of the sky. I painted the sun setting often this summer and noticed how it was always lighter at the horizon and darker um, further away from the horizon. So before I get too involved here with all these details, although I did just put a bunch of purple on my brush, so I might come in here and yeah, try to work loosely. We're going to approach this loosely and then go in for more details. So I'm just going to block in the mountain range. I'm going to use, again, blue with some of that burnt sienna and maybe a little bit of yellow. So I can get kind of a green color there. And then that yard there is a little bit warmer and more saturated. So you could use green out of the tube. I like to use some green and then add yellow to it to warm it up a little bit. Doing here. And again, like, I'm not sure what y'all are painting. And I think for the sake of this painting, I'm going to omit that garden in the foreground. Okay, so there's some questions. Britta, why do you prefer phthalo to cerulean or ultramarine for the sky? I don't necessarily prefer it. I just use it because that's what I have. Um, Phthalo blue is a relatively like newer pigment. It came out more in the 90s, I think, late 90s. Cerulean and ultramarine are more traditional pigments. They're a little bit, cerulean is a nice punchy blue, and I actually have um, some cerulean I will use, and I do like cerulean. Um, Ultramarine is a little bit, let's see, it's not as bright. It tends to give you a more neutral green when you use it. Um, the phthalo is just like a brighter green. It's phthalo colors are used for turquoise, um, like phthalo green and phthalo blue are mixed for a bright turquoise color. So I tend to use it because it's just a brighter color, but that's my own thing. I really like ultramarine also. Um, I also tend to mix my yellow and blue together for a green, and phthalo green or phthalo blue will give me a brighter green also. Um, but I encourage you to use ultramarine or cerulean. This is a color I love, this manganese blue hue. I mean, try out different colors. Um, and maybe this is a good segue into my discussion about color here. Um, so color is, we see color in relationship to what's around it. So it doesn't, and that's why, I say I use phthalo, but I don't require that you use it necessarily. Make the color work in your painting. Don't try to find the colors that are going to exactly match your photograph, because the photograph, first of all, it might not be a good print, or even like the sky, like if you're painting from life, the light's going to change really fast. So just try to make the color work in your painting, rather than making it exactly, like you think it's supposed to be, or exactly like how you see it in the photograph. Like I said, we see color according to what's around it. We don't just see like a single color, we see color relationships. So you want the color relationships to work, um, more than, sometimes it's just such a struggle to get the exact color of something. So I try to encourage people to see the color in relationship to what's around it rather than as its own entity. And I'm not sure if that makes sense, but um, if you want a really bright sky, you can use a bright pigment like phthalo blue with white. But if you don't have phthalo blue and you only have ultramarine, which isn't as punchy, you want to make the sky work within your painting. And that's going to be according to values, lights and darks, and other colors around it. So that's a very, very roundabout way of answering your question. I don't prefer phthalo. I just tend to use it because it's what I have. But I find my first year students really love phthalo because it's easy to get a really bright blue from it. I don't know if that answered your question, Roberta, but maybe just the question is what's the difference between using them? And that's the difference. The phthalo is a brighter blue. It tends to really dominate a painting if you're not like careful with it. Ultramarine is a little bit more neutral blue. Okay, so let me come back to my picture here. All right, I'm gonna mix up a yellow, green. Kind of started here. I'm gonna do some more. So I have a very loose thing happening here, and now I'm going to start doing more detail. So for me, since I suggested the challenge of keeping with your big brush, what you want to do is wipe out as much pigment as possible from your brush, clean out your brush as good as possible, and then we'll come in here and we'll start putting in more details. So I am going to mix for this red bar, I'm going to mix alizarin crimson and um, my two reds. I like to mix my two reds together. I also have quinacridone magenta here. You could try mixing that. This red is, because it's at night, it's a little bit darker, so I'm going to take a little bit of my sepia and mix that in there too. Now you can make, like for me with this shed I'm making at this size, I'm going to just try to make it with a few brush strokes. I'm not going to try to get every single little detail in there. Like I've seen people take a tiny brush and then try to do every single line. I think just for the sake of this, try, if you have some little thing like this in your landscape, just try getting that with just a few brush strokes. So with these windows, I might put a block of white down first and then take a little dark to go over it. For the dark window inside, use the top of the brush for lines also like this. Kind of looks like eyes. Then I'm going to come in and start to place in the tree. So in my picture, the tree is a little bit more in silhouette. So I like to use the corner of the brush and start to get in the form of this tree. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, practice using a big brush to get small details. It's really, I think for me, the sign of a really good painter is when they can describe a lot of detail with just a few brush strokes, as opposed to trying to draw in all those details with a teeny tiny brush. I like to see how an artist will, put that detail in just with a few marks. So talking about brushwork a little bit, something I have on here that's really, it's kind of annoying when I say it, but an incorrect stroke of color done confidently is sometimes more successful than the correct color applied tentatively. So try to just paint, as opposed to taking a small brush. And I know when I'm doing this, it's usually when I'm trying to get a lot of detail in something, taking a small brush and, a tiny bit of paint and then trying to I'm not doing it right now, but like when you're trying to get a little bit of detail, or if your paint isn't wet enough, sometimes also that can give this like overwrought quality to the painting, or if you're over blending or over, like what I'm doing right now, um, like let's say, it's hard to just explain, but like when you're like, when you find yourself like working a lot in one little section of your painting and not using a lot of paint, and maybe you just keep painting and there's no paint on your brush, um, or like you're trying to get a really small detail or something. Sometimes that can make a painting look um, like you're not sure of what's going on. Um, Another thing people will do is like use a lot of water and just a little bit of color, and maybe try to get on. It's not so bad on paper, but sometimes on canvas that can look just uncertain, like you're not certain. um, I just put that out there. Again, there's always exceptions to things. um, I think I know it when I'm doing it, when I'm just like trying really hard to be careful and not really putting a lot of paint on and like overworking something. um, I'm just putting it out there as something to think about, but don't overthink it. um, Some of my favorite paintings are just when people just put the paint down, and I can, for some reason, I feel like I can tell when that happens. And it's not something I can describe, but um, also because I've been painting for a long time, I tend to read paintings a certain way. And I think, I'm sure this is happening for all of you. As the longer you paint, when you look at other paintings, there's almost a language in the paint brushwork, um, that you start to intuitively feel. If you agree with me, let me know. If you think I'm totally not making any sense, that's fine. I understand. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to, when you paint something like I'm painting this little shed here, it's not just about painting the shed, it's also about painting the surroundings of the shed, and using that to help you paint the shed. Do you know what I mean? It's not just like paint a landscape and now I'm going to carefully paint a shed on top of the landscape. I like to feel like I'm embedding something like this into the landscape. So the paint that surrounds that shed is just as important as the paint I'm using for the shed. When I have stuff like wood or shingles or like little lines like that, I try to just get that in the brush stroke rather than taking a tiny brush and trying to get all that detail. So I'll use what's called broken color, where I don't um, mix the paint a lot. And so then, you can get like a mark of paint that has like these lines, like these striations in it already. Um, and then sometimes that will just help to describe something like shingles on a roof, or, wood paneling or something. But at some point, I like to just abandon the photograph and then just start making, like, I'm not going to use a photograph anymore. I'm just going to look at this, remember the feeling of this place where I was, and just come up with an interesting painting from here. Um, it's a good exercise to try to paint something from memory. Like if you want to just stare at your photograph for 30 seconds and try to really retain everything and then go ahead and paint, that's a really good practice. It's good for your brain too. It's like a good brain activity, um, that you might try. You might leave parts of the painting unresolved or try something really different that you normally wouldn't try with your brushwork, maybe. Like if you're used to making your brush strokes all, in one direction, maybe try a different direction with your brush strokes. The last thing I want to suggest to you in this particular painting, whatever it is you're working on, and you do not have to do this, but maybe just for an element of surprise, introduce a new color onto your palette to incorporate into your painting. And that can be any color you want, whether it's a different kind of a blue, an orange, just some color you have that you don't use a lot. Um, you don't have to do this, but if you want to, I just want to throw that out there as another way to surprise yourself as a painter. Like for me, I like to keep things from getting too formulaic sometimes. So I like to just give myself challenges to work with. there is this color that I like so much. I have covered up the name of it, but it's basically anthraquinone blue. It's a dark, like an indigo blue almost, and I really like using that with a little bit of this quinacridone magenta for a purple, and then almost applying that as a glaze on top of everything. So just take like another 2 or 3 minutes to just finish whatever you're doing. And since we're almost at the end of the hour, I want to encourage you to try to do another version of this um, bigger, and take more time with it if you need to. Maybe try some different materials, try some drawing materials. I really love the look of like charcoal and marker in my paintings. Or let this dry and work with marker or charcoal on top of it. Um, that's another way to make something unexpected in your paintings, is to use some other materials. Let's see if there's anything else. So if you ever have a painting of a landscape that's really kind of dull, for lack of a better word, like it's too, it looks like it's an overcast day. It doesn't look like it's sunny. It doesn't look dark. It doesn't have like, it's just kind of like blah. You probably need to amp the contrast of things. You need to probably go darker in your shadows and lighter in your highlights. And that's going to give you maybe more contrast, which could make something look more interesting. So if all your colors are kind of in the same value and getting washed out, try to amplify the contrast of things. The sky in this painting or in this photograph is dramatic because of that bright, hot, like that bright spot in contrast with these darker values. So that's what gives the drama there in the sky. And you might have a very foggy day, a very understated day, and you don't want to have a lot of drama in it, and that's perfectly fine too. If you want things to be a little more blended, you can take just a soft bristle brush and blend things. But again, just be aware of your painting looking. Sometimes if you overblend, something can look just overworked, overwrought. I really like a nice contrast in my paintings, like a part of the painting that's blended, and then a part of it that's more rigorous in the brushwork. Um, just some things to think about and to keep in mind as you're painting. So let me know if you're working and you have any other questions. I pretty much touched on all the things I wanted to talk about today. And I'm just going to start this picture now on a larger scale. And I'll just start that for the rest of this class today. Yeah, and feel free to just throw some questions at me. I think for the next one I do, I actually want to change. I want to have it go vertically. If you are interested in getting a copy of these, I've handed these out. Some of you have taken classes with me in a classroom, and if you have, you probably have at least one copy of this somewhere in your stuff. I've handed it out in most of my classes, but just things to think about when you're painting. So for this one, I think I'm going to divide my painting more into thirds. Sometimes I like to exaggerate things also, make it like it's like a fisheye lens, kind of exaggerate the curve of the uh, landscape. And I really like seeing, like with markers, I love seeing them in the painting later on. So you might just try doing a drawing in marker or charcoal first. There's just a lot of different ways to approach painting, is hopefully what I get. I hope you get that out of this. There's not just one way to do anything. One other tip is that often I will leave something, put it aside, and come back to it in a couple hours, in a couple days, or a couple weeks, and just come at it with fresh eyes, and that's going to help me also with finishing it. When I use these fluid acrylics, sometimes I like to just work flat a little bit more. Wet my paper here. You can see how that's doing some interesting things there on the canvas. And sometimes I'll just leave some of that. So one thing I'm going to share with you, something I realized when I was at this Golden Paints residency over the summer, and that is that I find, and this is, don't come at me. This is a little bit in contrary or in contrast to what I've taught in my classes, but I have found that the fluid paints are more versatile than the tubes. And I'm throwing that out there at the very end of this session, but these fluid, and I'm not necessarily talking about the high flow, I'm talking about the fluid acrylics. These are a nice middle paint. Like, I can use a thicker medium and mix this into them and make them thicker, or I can work with them right out of the tube like this, or I can add more water and medium to them and make them more fluid. They're really good for adding into pastes and mediums to make them thicker. So I think if I had to do it again and teach some more in the future, I would be recommending to people on the first day to get the fluid acrylics and a heavy medium, because you can go more fluid and you can go thicker with them. And it's not always as easy to go thinner with these heavy body materials. So that is one thing I learned over the summer that I was like, I haven't been teaching things wrong, but in the future, I would recommend just get more fluid paint, more of these fluid acrylics. They tend to just be a little bit easier to work with than the heavy body paints in the tube. Okay, that's one thing. Should I tell you one other thing I learned? It's more, this is more about waste and handling water and waste and chemicals and stuff like that. But in my classes, I always taught to have a big container of water like this, fill this up and use that to clean out your brushes. And if I had to do it again, I would recommend that you always have paper towels or rags on hand and try to wipe off as much of the paint as possible before wetting your brush. Just to eliminate getting the pigments in the water and tossing out water that has pigments in it. It's a little bit harder on the environment than if you're, the drier you can have your paint. They had a rule, like, if it's dry, it's okay. If it's wet, then it starts to be a problem. So think about, like, if you can, if I had all this paint left over, obviously I'd want to try to use as much of this as possible. But if I didn't, I'd want to let this dry, peel it off, and then toss it out, as opposed to washing it all down the drain. Thank you, Sue. I'm glad you agree about the fluids. I find them a little more versatile. Okay, so yeah, that's the other thing. If you can, try to wash as little pigment down the drain as possible. Try to dry it first. wipe your brush into rags, toss the rag out, scrape off paint you're not going to use, but don't wash big blobs of paint down the drain. And then the final takeaway that I'll share with you, just because I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to do another live stream, the final takeaway is that molding paste, molding paste can be used for textures. As I've taught a lot, like this stuff can be used to create a lot of texture in your paintings, but it can also be used conversely. It can also be used to make a really smooth surface. So you can take molding paste and like a credit card and put it over your canvas. If you don't like canvas weave, if it's bugging you, but you like working on canvas, you just don't like the weave of it, take your molding paste and spread it with a credit card or a big stick or something over your canvas. And that's going to give you a nice smooth surface to work on. Those are the three takeaways. Those are the three big things I learned that have really changed how I work with acrylics now and paint in general since the residency. All right, so maybe I'll get to work on this some more, and if so, I will record it and post it on my video channel. But I'm starting school next week, and pretty much this week I have some things I have to do there. So I don't think I'll really be able to do live stream painting for a while, unfortunately, although I really want to. So we'll see. Probably, if I do it in the future, it won't be on Mondays. It might be on the weekends, but I'll let you know. And feel free to send me questions about anything. Keep me updated on your life. Just ahead, I'm having a big studio sale in October, and I'll send you all information on that. And hopefully I'll get to see some of you for that. We're going to be doing limited people in and out of the house and all of that stuff. So, but anyway, let me know if you have questions. I'm going to sign off of here. Excellent tips. I've loved working with the open acrylics. Yes, the open acrylics are good for plein air. I'm glad you like those. Even just getting what's the open medium and mixing it into your paints is good too. All the best in Johnson City. Thank you, Anne. Thanks, Judith. Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens. It's a total life change. Like, I have to admit, things have been really like feeling weird. Like, wow, I was teaching for 10 years and now I'm not. Okay, everyone, thanks so much. Oh, thank you, Joan. You're wonderful. Thank you. Keep in touch, and I'll be in touch, and happy painting, everyone. Thank you. I love all of you guys. You're the best. You've been awesome. Thank you. All right. See you later. Bye.